Om Ganatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitang Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare. Tonight I'm going to attempt to finish some of the glories of Prahlada Maharaj. Some of you may have seen online part 1, in which Narada Muni glorifies Prahlada Maharaj. This is from Brhad Bhagavatamrita. And Narada Muni was put on to Prahlada by Lord Shiva, remember? Quick recap. Narada Muni was all set to go from Lord Shiva to Mahalakshmi because Lord Shiva was glorifying Mahalakshmi as the greatest devotee. And then just when Narada Muni was about to take off for Vaikuntha to see Mahalakshmi and praise her as the greatest devotee, what happened? Lord Shiva took him aside and whispered in his ear something he said he couldn't say out loud because his wife Parvati is friends with Mahalakshmi. You see, even in the highest realms, such intricacies can be there. He said if Parvati heard and then told Mahalakshmi, there could be disrespect heaped upon both Narada Muni and Lord Shiva himself. He didn't want to go through that with his consort Parvati. So he whispered in Narada Muni's ear about Prahlada is actually the greatest devotee. So briefly, remember, Prahlada is the disciple of Narada Muni. Yet, Narada Muni runs off to find Prahlada, to embrace him, to glorify him. Prahlada sees his guru coming from afar, and he offers his obeisances and starts gathering puja paraphernalia to offer puja, offer him a seat. But Narada Muni won't let him. Narada Muni is so overwhelmed with ecstasy. He just embraces his own disciple. I've heard of your glories. And then Narada Muni presents his case. From the very beginning of your life, as a child, you were always a pure devotee, setting the standard for pure devotion. And look at all that you tolerated. Your own father committed so many atrocities against you. While your father is torturing you, you're preaching to so many of your schoolmates from demoniac families. And you're displaying such ecstatic symptoms when you hear about Krishna, and you chant and you dance with abandon. There's no doubt of your devotional stature, Prahlada. What's more, Lord Nrsingadev appeared just for you, Prahlad, out of affection for you. He ignored Brahma, he ignored Shiva, he ignored Lakshmi Devi. Only you, Prahlad, could get through to him and pacify him. And pacify him you did, Prahlad. Lord Nrsingadev picked you up from the floor because you were laying prostrate at his feet. He patted you on his head, on your head. He patted you on your head, Prahlad. He rocked you back and forth like a parent does to a child. He licked your entire body like a lioness does to her cub. There's no doubt about it, Prahlad. Such extraordinary affection, unparalleled. Prahlad, the conclusion is that your devotion cannot be matched. Now, this situation is presenting a crisis for Prahlad Maharaj. And it may be a little hard for us to understand. We like to be glorified. If you ever happen to overhear someone talking nicely about you, oh, how good it feels. You walk past a room and the door's open, and there may be some other devotees in the room, and they're talking about you, and they don't know that you're passing the doorway, and you overhear nice things. Oh. So when we hear about Prahlad Maharaj's reaction, this may be hard for us to relate to. It sounds so otherworldly. What's wrong with having self-esteem? What's wrong with thinking highly of your abilities when you know you've done something fantastic? What's wrong with feeling proud of yourself? I'm doing this for Krishna. I'm doing that for Krishna. Just see my prowess. Just see my spiritual Shakti. The Goswamis of Vrindavan say that actually the desire for fame is the most difficult material desire to give up. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur compares a devotee's desire for fame to be like if you're wandering in the forest and somehow or other a boar passes stool, a wild boar passes stool on your head. That excrement on your head is like the desire for fame. And even if you do get some fame, let's say material or spiritual, it seems to provide some relief, some satisfaction. I'm known, I'm appreciated. My name is being glorified. So yes, it does seem to grant some succor. But the difficult part now comes to maintain that fame. Hard labor. You're not going to be satisfied with just one moment in the sun. Material desires don't work like that. Once you taste celebrity status in whatever tiny or large way, you want more, or at least you want that status maintained. One great devotee compares it to carrying a heavy umbrella. That heavy umbrella certainly provides you with relief from the sun. So at first, yes, shade. But then You have to carry that heavy umbrella. And that's burdensome. It's wearisome. So how is it that these greatest devotees, Prahlad Maharaj, naturally, organically feel when they hear glorification that you can't really be talking about me? You either have to be exaggerating, or you have to be distorting the truth, or it can't be. So you're going to hear this in his very humble and devotional refutation of what his own guru is saying about him. Now, some things Prahlad Maharaj won't refute, so to speak. Some things he'll just ignore. But his whole point is that it's not me. Whatever I'm doing is just the mercy of Lord Nrsingadev and you, Narada Muni. It's not me. It's the Bhakti Shakti, the Lord's internal potency that's causing all these things to happen. Anyone can do what I'm doing. Why are you pointing out to me that I'm some kind of favorite of the Lord? Just like fire in a cold room. Everyone gets the heat. When the Lord's internal potency is acting, everyone becomes inspired. Brhad Bhagavatamrita, although it seems so otherworldly, can really teach us about devotee relations. So we may think, oh, this is so far beyond me. Down on the ground, there's a battle with lust, anger, greed, envy, madness, and illusion. And then we hear all these exalted realities about Prahlad Maharaj. We wish that day would come when we could have a drop of that ocean. But however, let us not forget that by hearing, we become purified. By hearing these glories of the devotees, we develop aspirations. Things have to start somewhere, somehow. So by hearing about Prahlad's standard of bhakti, our core being starts aspiring. Yes, if only I could be like that. And the super soul in your heart notices that. Ah, so that's what you want. Of course, we're very impatient. Everything has to happen overnight. But I can say for myself that as the years go by in bhakti, the most inconceivable perceptions come upon you. What you thought was so impossible becomes possible. A devotee naturally starts thinking, I'm nothing, yet Krishna so kindly engaged me in his service. All I do is complain. Krishna is so tolerant. One example that Srila Prabhupada would give is from Chaitanya Charitamrita. Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami saying that he's describing himself that he's lower than a worm in stool and more sinful than Jagayamata. Both of those things are quite something to say. Does he really mean it? I mean, Jagai and Madai were so corrupt and degraded and then lower than a worm and stool? Does he really believe that? Or is he just saying that? Sometimes we say, oh, I'm so fallen, Prabhu. But inwardly we're thinking, give me some distinction for saying that. Or I'm saying this because, I've heard it's devotee lingo. I'm so fallen. I know I'm useless. But Kaviraja Goswami really means it. How is that possible? Similarly, how is it possible that Prahlad Maharaj doesn't accept what Narada Muni is saying? That Prahlad Maharaj really thinks what he thinks. Now, he's got to be careful because he's going to deny what his guru says about him. So he's going to do it in a very devotional way. And it's appropriate in the world of bhakti because Prahlad is going to say, it's actually all because of you. The bhakti is coming from you. So let's get into it. The emotions of the situation. Prahlad was actually unable to tolerate hearing his own praise. He was embarrassed. He lowered his face and then speaking very quietly, he dealt with Narada Muni's assertions. He kind of thought that Narada Muni was just teasing him. Now, if it were someone else than Narada Muni, Prahlad might have been a bit angry. How can you say such things? Are you trying just to inflate my ego or what? But with the greatest respect, he's speaking to his guru, Narada Muni. And what is the first thing he says? Shri Prahlada Vacha Bhagavan Shri Guru Sarvam Swayameva Vicharyatam Balyena Sambhavet Krishna Bhakti Jnanam Api Sputam. My Lord, my spiritual master, please reconsider everything you've said. Please reconsider everything you said, my Lord, Gurudev. First of all, you said that as a little child, I was so precocious in bhakti. I knew so much about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But we all know, Narada Muni, that what can a child understand about the science of Krishna, Krishna Tattva? Well, we all know that's not possible. A little child's a little child. No intelligent discrimination, just a little innocent kid. What does he know? What did I know? Now, Prahlad grants there could be exceptions and rare exceptions in very highly cultured families, but everyone knows I'm born in a family of demons, so there certainly can't be any exception known as me. So the general rule has to apply. Don't expect anything smart coming from a little child. But I can say where all the ability came from that I may have manifested as a child. It came from you, Narada Muni. My spiritual assets are all because of you. You gave me transcendental knowledge and you guided me on the path of bhakti. So because of you and the knowledge you gave me, Narada Muni, I could persevere despite such extraordinary harassment from my father. Because of you, Narada Muni, I could give spiritual enlightenment to the other children surrounding me. Because of you, Narada Muni, I can show compassion to suffering souls. And because of you, Narada Muni, I could even refuse the boon of liberation when offered by Lord Nrsingadev. I spoke about this in part 1, in which Prahlad is enticed. Indeed, it seems that Lord Nrsingadev is trying to trap him. Again and again, take a benediction, Prahlad, take a benediction, anything you want. And again, Prahlad says, I just want pure bhakti. I don't mind taking birth after birth. I don't mind being born again and again, as long as I can have pure devotional service. Lord Nrsingadev is even offering Prahlad Vaikuntha, Param, not simply moksha, liberation. Still, Prahlad says, I just want to be your servant. So Prahlad is attributing this pure devotional stance to Narada Muni's mercy, Narada Muni's guidance, Narada Muni's instruction. Now, Prahlad denies some of Narada Muni's assertions. Others he deflects. He does admit, I was able to withstand the torments of Hiranyakashipu. Okay, it happened. But it's by the internal potency of the Lord. And that internal potency of the Lord is available to all devotees. As far as my preaching to the demoniac school children, Prahlad said, that's because really great souls, truly great souls, are not supposed to be dealing with immature children who have no discrimination. But I could do it as one of their peers, as one of their fellow children. So, because I was young and foolish, I was the man, I was the kid for the job, so to speak. Narada Muni had referred to Prahlad as always being absorbed in meditation, smarana, of the 9 devotional services. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam. Prahlad demonstrates the perfection of Smaranam, remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So he skips over that one. And he talks about dancing and singing in ecstasy. In other words, he confessed, yeah, I do that. But even neophytes can put on a show like that. So Prahlad is convincing Narada Muni that what you see in me is just bhakti in general. It can happen to anyone. And if you see any good in me that you want to ascribe to me personally, then let me tell you, it's all because of Lord Nrsingadev and you. The Lord only gives his mercy, Prahlad said, to those who deserve it. There's no way I could deserve it. But you, Narada, are blessed by that bhakti shakti, the Lord's internal potency. You know that only a proper candidate can receive that mercy. In other words, you know I'm not the proper candidate. Then Prahlad gives a hint what's coming next. He says, I've never done any real devotional service. I may have remembered the Lord when I was in trouble, when my mind was disturbed. But other than Smaranam, sometimes, due to material distress, I haven't done any service like Hanuman. Prahlad is pointing out that I was disturbed by material anxieties. So how could you say I'm a big-time meditator on the Supreme Lord? I wasn't doing any practical seva like Hanuman. Another point Narada Muni raised was that Prahlad received such affection from Lord Nrsingadev. Lord Nrsingadev even caressed Prahlad, and as we heard, licked his whole body, rocked him back and forth. So Prahlad says two things about that. He says, if you're a Mayavadi, if you're an impersonalist, you'll consider all that kind of reciprocation and demonstration of affection to be false. Because Mayavadis think that anything personal you see in existence is just a temporary creation of the modes of material nature. And that beyond the modes of material nature is undifferentiated oneness. So all the Lord's appearances, forms, qualities, activities, they're like the essence of the material mode of goodness. So Mayavadis fantasize are beyond the names, forms, qualities, and pastimes of Krishna is the undifferentiated oneness, monism. So therefore, they consider such affectionate dealings between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his devotee as just fiction, imaginary. Nice stories, but ultimately not real. Of course, the Vaishnavas know better and experience better. So Prahlad says, okay, we know that what Lord Nrsingadev did with me, his dealings with me are real, but let me tell you something. He was just acting for his own enjoyment. Remember, the Lord is self-sufficient and independent. It's not really me that was the big deal. The Lord is just doing his pastimes, that's all. Furthermore, I consider those affectionate dealings to be no more real than a dream. Why? Because it all happened so quickly. A dream comes, a dream goes. So yes, the Lord's dealings with Prahlad, he said, are real, but they lasted for such a short time. Therefore, such dealings are as good as unreal, even though they are real. Again, Prahlad brings up the point of Hanuman. When the Lord truly gives his mercy, what does he do? He grants devotional service, just as he did with Hanuman. Nothing else counts as his mercy. Prahlad is emphasizing these small displays of affection are not the proof of the Supreme Personality of Godhead's mercy on me. Look at Hanuman. Look at Sugriva. Look at the Yadu associates like the Pandavas. They did so much. So how could you say that I am a special recipient of the Lord's mercy? I simply remembered him sometimes because my mind was agitated by material distress. Then Prahlad pointed out that it wasn't me, because Lord Nrsingadev wanted to, number one, uphold the words of Brahma, who said that he gave Hiranyakashipu those benedictions. You won't be killed this way, that way, the other way. He wanted to uphold the words of Brahma's sons, the 4 Kumaras, who cursed Jai and Vijay and said they would be back in Vaikuntha in 3 births. The Lord wanted to protect Indra and the other demigods. He had so many words to fulfill. That was the real reason, Prahlad said, for his appearance, not me. The 4 Kumaras had predicted the killing of Hiranyakashipu. Even Prahlad had made statements. When Hiranyakashipu asked him, "Is your Lord everywhere?" Prahlad said, "Of course, yes, he's everywhere." Even before that, Prahlad had stated that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is present throughout the material creation. So certainly, he could then tell Hiranyakashipu, yes, he's in the pillar. And indeed, he could see Lord Nrsingadev peering out of the pillar. And Hiranyakashipu noticed that Prahlad is acting like he sees something in the pillar. And that enraged Hiranyakashipu. And therefore, he took his fist to smash the pillar. "I don't see anything, Prahlad. What are you looking at like you see something? We all know you don't see anything." "Because you're speaking nonsense, I'm going to cut your head off. We all know you don't see anything." Remember when Prahlad was in the womb of his mother? And Indra and the demigods wanted to kill the unborn Prahlad in the womb. Say, demigods doing that? But they thought, this child in the womb, his father is such a cosmic havoc, a terrorist on a cosmic scale. What will the son be like? We have to do something to solve the problem in the bud, nip it in the bud. In other words, Hiranyakashipu was such an ogre on a cosmic scale that the demigods would consider doing such a thing, killing the unborn Prahlad in the womb. But then Narada Muni came and told them, even if you wanted to, you can't kill this child. This child is a great devotee. And just by hearing, the demigods accepted circumambulated the pregnant mother and left. This is the power of hearing for an intelligent person. There are other words that Prahlad Maharaj said had to be backed up by the appearance of Lord Nrsingadev. After all, and what does Krishna say in Bhagavad Gita? Kauntaya pratidani name bhakta pranasyati. My dear Arjuna, tell it boldly, loudly. My devotee never perishes. And then, te shamaham samuddarta mrityu samsara saga. I quickly deliver my devotees from the ocean of birth and death. So Prahlad is saying, you say these things in Bhagavad Gita, so you had to appear to, in order to back up these statements. It's not really so much for me. Remember though, Narada Muni had said, what about this unforgettable scene when none of the demigods could pacify Lord Nrsingadev, and he showers affection on you alone, Prahlad. Even Lakshmi Devi couldn't accomplish this purpose. But Prahlad answers that Lord Nrsingadev simply wanted to draw attention to the greatness of pure devotional service. It's not really about me, Prahlad is saying. He wants to show that even someone born in a demoniac family can receive the Lord's reciprocation by meditating on him in all circumstances, even the most dangerous ones. Prahlad has an answer for everything, but he's sincere. He really thinks in this way. And he's very respectfully refuting what Narada Muni has said about him and deflecting some other things. And remember, as he's doing this, he's giving all the credit to Lord Nrsingadev and to Narada Muni. Prahlad comes up with a good proof why there's nothing special about him. He said, just look. Great devotees don't possess anything material, but what did Lord Nrsingadev do to me? He gave me a kingdom and told me to rule it. Now that shows you where I'm at. When he did that, I understood I haven't received a single drop of his mercy. He gave me my father's kingdom. He actually punished me severely because I'm a materialist. Now remember, before Lord Nrsingadev appeared from the pillar, he told Prahlad, you are so unfortunate. Why? To Hiranyakashipu's mind, Prahlad had just, as we would say, blown it completely. He explained, Prahlad, you were in line to inherit the whole universe from me. That was going to be yours. But now you're destined to die at my hands. You're so unfortunate. Here, Prahlada says he's unfortunate because he was given the kingdom by Lord Nrsingadev. Oh no, that shows you where I'm really at. Prahlad points out that when the Lord really wants to favor someone, he takes away all his opulence. Krishna knows how neophyte devotees can be materially swayed by opulence. And generally, the possession of opulence, wealth, leads to enmity, strife, rivalry, pride, arrogance. Brhad Bhagavatamrita, as supporting evidence, mentions Sudama Vipra. His wife very energetically motivated him to go to Dwarka, get some material wealth from Krishna, his old childhood friend, because Sudama and his wife were living in such poverty. You know this pastime, how Sudama indeed saw his old friend Krishna in Dwarka, and then left the palace. Krishna walked into the gate of the palace. That's a sign of respect. And Sudama started walking home to his pitiful shack. And what was he thinking? How merciful my Lord is. He didn't give me anything. He knows that just a tiny bit of material wealth would have finished my spiritual life. Oh, how glorious he is. Just think. How would we respond? We'd probably be angry. But Sudama Vipra is glorifying the Supreme Personality of Godhead in ecstasy. He knows where I'm at. He's my well-wisher. He didn't give me a penny. He knows I would have been intoxicated by the prosperity and would become spiritually finished. The other example is Vritrasura, 6th canto. He tells Indra, we're both devotees, but you, Indra, are attached to the material world, and I am going back to the spiritual world. When you kill me, I'm free from material existence. I'm in the spiritual world. But you, Indra, although it seems you have the victory, you have to stay in the material world with temporary material opulence. If you, Indra, really received the mercy of the Supreme Lord, you would never get anything from him that's obtainable in the material world. He said, when one possesses material opulence in any of the 3 divisions of the universe, upper, middle, lower planetary systems, his possessions naturally increase his enmity, anxiety, mental agitation, pride, and belligerence. Thus, one goes through much endeavor to increase and maintain his possessions, and he suffers great unhappiness when he loses them. In the battle between Vritrasura and Indra, yes, Indra was destined to win, but the real victor is Vritrasura, who went to Vaikuntha. So Vritrasura was actually urging Indra, come on, launch your thunderbolt, finish me off. It'll seem that you're the victor, but actually I'm the victor. You have to stay in the material world. I go back to the spiritual world. Come on, finish me off. This bhakti is extraordinary, isn't it? There's nothing like it in the material world because it's not a phenomenon of the material world. So again, you would think, wait a minute, this is just so beyond us. Oh, it's just too exalted. But by hearing, we become purified, and these spiritual aspirations start to develop in our core being. So Prahlad is saying to Narada Muni, the fact that Lord Nrsingadev told me to rule as king over my father's kingdom shows where I'm at. It shows my attachments. And I'm not even crying about this. Because of that, I should be condemned again and again and again. I'm not even lamenting that I'm so attached. I'm not even lamenting that my bhakti has been eclipsed by material attachment to a kingdom. Now, the acharyas point out that Prahlad didn't say his bhakti has been destroyed by attachment to the kingdom. He says it's been eclipsed, overshadowed. Because in reality, bhakti can not be destroyed. It can be covered for a while. Then Prahlad goes back to his school days. He said, because of my association with demoniac children, demoniac teachers, it's obvious that my spiritual understanding is poisoned with speculation. Demons are always, Prahlad explains, demons are always expounding impersonal theories in which they do not acknowledge any devotional reciprocation with the Supreme Personality of God. Therefore, there can be no understanding or experience of bhakti rasa, the exchange of pure love. So Prahlad is pointing out that all this talk about the impersonal knowledge of the self is actually poisonous. Sometimes you hear that these days, that let's all be just spiritual, but no one knows what the dynamics of spiritual life are, what reciprocation is like on the spiritual platform. But no, let's just be spiritual. This is impersonalism. You're spiritual, I'm spiritual. Actually, we're all just that one spirit. So Prahlad says that his own understanding has to be contaminated in that way because of his association with demons. He says, I've obviously been infected. I can recite impersonal theories about the eternal soul, but I don't know anything about the relationship between the eternal soul and the supreme soul. Or maybe I know something, but my understanding is still affected by such degraded, dry speculation. Now, when Narada Muni was glorifying Prahlad Maharaj, he brought up the point that your grandson, Bali Maharaj, was such a great devotee, and that's because of you, Prahlad. And your great-grandson, Banasura, even though he screwed up, he was spared because he's your great-grandson. You remember how Lord Krishna eradicated almost all of Banasura's arms? Banasura was a devotee of Lord Shiva. Lord Shiva earlier in Brhad Bhagavatamrita had told Narada Muni about the glories of Prahlada. He said, it wasn't because of me, Lord Shiva, that Krishna spared Banasura, my devotee. It's because he's the great-grandson of Prahlada. Now, Prahlada is going to reply to this in a different way. Prahlada's going to say, look who's in my family line, Banasura. He rejected the family tradition of worshiping the Supreme Lord. He took shelter of Lord Shiva, a demigod. He abused Krishna's grandson Aniruddha by arresting him. Now, how can anyone who has such a wicked person in their family possess pure devotion? Tell me that, Narada. It's not possible. In other words, Prahlada is saying it would have been better that Banasura was killed, but because of the huge offenses he made. And here you are, Narada Muni, saying that it's because he's my great-grandson that the outcome was the way it was. Krishna spared him. Narada Muni had said that, Prahlad, wherever you are, Lord Nrsingadev is always there. He told you to visit Sutala after he gave the planet Sutala to Bali Maharaj. And he said, Prahlad, you also can visit there. But Prahlad is saying, you're implying that I'm always in the presence of the Lord, but I don't know where he is now. Yes, we're on Sutala now, but I don't know where he is. I don't know where he's gone from Sutala Loka. I can't say where he is. So how am I so fortunate that I'm always in his association? You say, Narada Muni, that even Brahma, Shiva, and the other demigods can rarely see the Supreme Personality Godhead. But here I am, and I don't know where he is. I don't know how I can freely have his audience. Sometimes he's here, sometimes not. It's amazing how fascinating these exchanges are. By these discussions, we start to see what bhakti is really all about. So Prahlad further says on this point that just because you're residing in the same place that the Lord may frequent doesn't mean you have his association. It's perfect love that motivates the Lord to reveal himself. If it were simply about the Lord's presence in a place as a sufficient factor for us to realize him, then every living entity in the universe should be realizing the Supreme Personality Godhead. Because everywhere is the Supreme Personality Godhead, but not everyone is seeing it that way. So it's not about residence, Prahlad's telling Narada Muni. It's about the pure bhakti that brings about the Supreme Personality Godhead's presence. Otherwise, everyone, just by looking at something material, a rock, anything, they should be able to see the presence of the Personality Godhead, but they don't. So that shows you, Narada Muni, it's all about perfect and pure love, which I don't have, Prahlada is saying. Prahlada is winding up his presentation now. He doesn't want Narada Muni to become unhappy. He says, "Oh, Narada, your heart overflows with causeless compassion. Why should I go on describing all my misfortunes, which simply make you unhappy? Instead, please consider the Lord's mercy on Hanuman. You've been talking to me, Narada Muni, just to encourage me with exaggerated praise. I don't want you to think that I'm overwhelmed with unhappiness. I'm your disciple. So since you're so intent on finding the real recipient of the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, I present to you Hanuman. And don't just accept my word for it. Go see him. As for Lord of Shringadev and me, Prahlad says, he appeared, and as soon as he fulfilled his purpose, he disappeared. I haven't really been able to see him directly whenever I wanted. I saw him briefly as he terminated Hiranyakashipu. I couldn't really express my feelings of bhakti because it was such a shocking situation, and I was overwhelmed with fear and reverence. There were so many demigods and sages present. I couldn't freely express my love. But Hanuman is much more fortunate. For thousands, many thousands of years, he has relished serving the personality of Godhead without any obstruction. And then Prahlad goes into a presentation of Hanuman's glories. And Narada Muni becomes overwhelmed by hearing about Hanuman and races off to find Hanuman. These glorious Vaishnava exchanges inspire us to come out of our passionate ignorance and even go beyond the mode of goodness through selfless devotional service, making the best of this temporary human form of life. Right now, the world is so severely affected by precariousness. People don't know, is the virus waning, or we've only just seen the first wave? In these circumstances, we're motivated to think, what am I doing? What's the value of my existence? Who do I believe in terms of what's safe and what's not safe? Many scientists admit that they don't fully understand the flu pandemic that hit in 1918, why there were 3 waves. They don't understand that 100 years later. What to speak of understanding completely what's happening now? There's so many uncertainties. As I pointed out before, the flu pandemic of 1918 infected one out of every 3 persons in the world. Of course, the population of the world was much smaller, but still 1 out of 3. And the mortality rate has been calculated as minimum 50 million and possibly 100 million. In India alone, that flu pandemic in 1918 finished off 17 million persons. So all this makes us think, what am I trying to accomplish in this life? Am I just building castles made of sand? And then the waves, the tide comes in and washes them all away at any moment? What am I about? What am I doing? But the glories of bhakti are beyond the influence of time, beyond the influence of the modes of material nature. So let's build up our bhakti. Life is short, it passes so quickly. Let's make the most of what we have now so that we can come closer to Krishna. Understand Krishna as much as possible, because not even Krishna understands himself completely. Therefore, he comes as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to understand what he can't understand as Krishna. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the form of Krishna and the heart and emotions of Srimati Radharani. He's Radha and Krishna combined. By the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we in this most degraded age have access to the most exalted knowledge, the most exalted lifestyle. All right. It's been such a pleasure talking to you all about the glories of Prahlad Maharaj. I see a few questions. Let me put on my glasses so I can read the small print. So Anantanag is asking that Prahlad Maharaj says that receiving opulence is not the real mercy of the Lord, but what about devotees like Pundarik Vijayanidhi, who seem to enjoy their material opulence at the same time display pure bhakti? Yeah. What about Ambarish Maharaj? What about Dhruva Maharaj? And what about Prahlad Maharaj? They all say that, oh, I'm so materially attached. But by their behavior and what they do, you see that they use everything in Krishna's service. So this is one of the paradoxes of bhakti. A real devotee thinks, I'm not a real devotee. Lord Nrsimhadev ordered Prahlad, after Prahlad presented himself as the eternal servant, the unmotivated, unconditional servant. Lord Nrsimhadev ordered him, you do this. Rule the kingdom until the end of this period of Manu. And then you go back to the spiritual. Prahlad accepted that as unmotivated servant, and he also accepted it to show mercy to the conditioned souls. That was the whole point of his administration. So yes, sometimes Krishna wants his devotees to display a bhakti life of handling opulence in perfection. And sometimes he wants them to display bhakti life in poverty. Remember Srila Prabhupada confiding that his plan was always, as a householder, to earn a big fortune and then spread bhakti all over the world, following the order of his spiritual master. He thought, as he described it, that no one will pay attention to a poor person from India. But if I'm very wealthy, then I'll have status and people will listen. So he said he wanted to come to the West as a wealthy person. And he confided that from the astrological point of view, he was meant to be one of the wealthiest persons ever in India. He said that Krishna and he had a disagreement. Srila Prabhupada wanted to do it as a wealthy person, and he said, Krishna wanted me to do it as a poor person. So he said, I did it as a poor person. So Krishna has his ways. Sudama Vipra, when he got home and saw the heavenly opulence that rivaled the opulence possessed by the demigods in heaven, he said, actually, I'm just a neophyte. I could be swayed by all this. His great concern was that he not be affected. Now, why, and this is a little hard to understand, why did Sudama Vipra receive such a overload of opulence? Although when he left Krishna's palace in Dwarka, it seemed that he had nothing. Indeed, he had nothing. But the most extraordinary surprise was waiting for him upon his return home. The Acharyas point out that Krishna knew Sudama Brahmana is too attached to renunciation. So I'm going to, so to speak, stick it to him. I'm going to put him in such opulence. You see, you can go either way. You can be too attached to material enjoyment. You can be too attached to material renunciation. Bhakti is independent of both. Bhakti means whatever Krishna wants, however Krishna wants it. If he wants you to demonstrate how to practice bhakti surrounded by untold opulence, you do that. If he wants you to demonstrate like Kolavecha Sridhar in Chaitanya Lila, having nothing, you do that. It's hard to understand bhakti from the material point of view. But then again, what can we really understand from the material point of view? Nothing. We have a question from Boma Brindavan. Why would Hiranyakashipu be disappointed that Prahlad had given up the opportunity to rule the kingdom when he mistakenly thought he could cheat death and essentially rule forever? Hiranyakashipu was thinking, yes, I've cheated death, but still I want to give to my son. He could have had it all, but he blew it. He's the most unfortunate. So the two are not contradictory points. Yes, he thought he had cheated death, and at the same time, he wanted Prahlad to receive the kingdom. And therefore, Prahlad was most condemned, most unfortunate. All right. It's been exciting for me to speak about Prahlad. Some of you may know that the first Krishna literature that I actually read was a booklet called The Transcendental Teachings of Prahlad Maharaj, a summary of Srila Prabhupada's lectures in the early days about Prahlad Maharaj. So by the time I read page 2, I was finished. The unforgettable knowledge that Prahlad gives. And why should you work so hard to get the same taste of material enjoyment? The same taste that the cats and dogs have. I was totally blown away by this. I read the whole booklet, The Transcendental Teachings of Prahlad, and then decided, let me go seek out more books by this Swami whose name I couldn't pronounce. So I went to a bookstore in New York City and found Bhagavad Gita. Was only available in the abridged version then. Bhagavad Gita as it is, and some other books. So we all owe so much to Prahlad Maharaj, whose knowledge comes down through parampara. And by reading and reading and reading this knowledge, it starts to sink in, but we have to do it every day. It's not that the material energy takes a break. Okay, I won't bother you today. Or you can slack off on your sadhana today. I'll allow you to have a vacation. No. We're in an ongoing environment of harassment, inducement, and hallucination. So daily, we need to fortify ourselves. And we'll be very weak devotees until we realize that and practice it. So this virus situation is reminding us our material existence, as Govinda Das says in his song, Bhaja Rema. Our material existence is like a drop of water on a leaf of a lotus flower. Any moment, that drop of water can fall off. So let's equip ourselves, fortify ourselves, nourish ourselves with the knowledge that Narada Muni gives, Prahlad Maharaj gives, as it descends through parampara. Last question. Somya Radhika. She's asking about, during the day, so many emotions come and go. We can get caught up in them. They can distract us. What to do? Emotions are meant to be used in Krishna's service. That's the advice of Narottam Das Thakur. Express gratitude, express eagerness, express anger at how society is organized in such a way that people are being bewildered and can't see what the real point of life is. Express envy. How does a devotee express envy? Through appreciation. Oh, you're so much better. How wonderful you're doing. Whereas material envy means, how How can I drag you down? How can I minimize you? So bhakti envy is positive. It's actually about appreciation. Because you can only, as I often point out, you can only envy someone who has something better or who's done something better. So if someone's done something better, then just appreciate. You have done better. How wonderful. Let me try harder. So yes, there's a way to use all our emotions in Krishna's service. And the proof that they're spiritual, that is, if we're utilizing those emotions properly, the proof that they're spiritual is that they lead to an increase in service, not a decrease. All right. I thank you all for your kind attention, your kind association. Hare Krishna.